Welcome to the Crush Your Sugar Cravings Summit. I'm Michelle Jolly. Today we're going to be speaking with Wolfram Alderson. Wolfram's career in pursuit of social and environmental change has spanned several decades. He currently serves as CEO of the Hypoglycemia Support Foundation and is hyper-focused on metabolic health and nutrition. Wolfram also serves as Global Education Director for Dr. Robert Lustig, world-renowned pediatric neuroendocrinologist and best-selling author. The broad focus of his lifetime work has been improving human and environmental health, often by developing programs and organizations that accomplish both. His career began in his teens when he founded the first certified farmers market in California in 1979, including the Gardenia Farmers Market, which is still in existence today. That's a great thing to start with. So welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. We got a little taste of your background, but why don't you let us know kind of how you got started? I know the farmers market kind of kicked things off a little bit, but how did you decide this is kind of what you wanted your life work to be, and what brought you to this place?
Well, it really was that first job where I actually had volunteered for an organization in Los Angeles that turned out to be an interfaith organization that was concerned about hunger. It was called the Interfaith Hunger Coalition. And they got a grant from at that time, the Carter administration to focus on food security in Los Angeles. At that time, there were many food deserts, as they were called, and they're still there today, unfortunately. And I was fortunate to be hired as the first hire to organize certified farmers markets. And the difference was certified. This was a program that was actually established by the state of California because farmers markets had become illegal, and not only in California, but in many states. That's the regulations and so on. And so once those regulations were passed in California, they're called the direct marketing regulations. The organization got a grant and hired me to start organizing markets. And the Gardena Farmers Market was the first in Los Angeles area, in South Central Los Angeles. And the 3 years that I worked with that organization and doing that work just fueled my passion. I realized that we could create change, and it was very exciting. Right now, you know, farmers markets may seem to be ubiquitous. They're sort of everywhere. Let's grab a latte and go down to the farmers market. But back in the late 70s, this was really kind of a big deal, and we had all the television stations and radio and press, front page news, Los Angeles Times, etc. So it was kind of a big deal back then, and so that really kickstarted my career. And I've had many, it's been a long and winding road the last 4 decades, but always kind of at the intersection of human and environmental health, and really, focusing on human health, but doing that by changing the environment. And so there's a long reel of my work on my LinkedIn page, but that's the short version. And then, I've been a vegetarian since I was in my late teens, and thought I knew something about nutrition and health, but I've always struggled with obesity, and in my late 30s, I was told I was pre-diabetic. I wasn't told to do anything with my diet. I wasn't told to lose weight. I was just sort of informed of this inevitability. Then later, eventually being formally diagnosed with type 2. And I, of course, realized in my 50s, after meeting Dr. Lustig, that I didn't really know much at all about nutrition science.
Yeah.
And that many of the beliefs that I had were simply false, and they were actually feeding my progression of chronic disease versus helping me. And so that has, I have skin in the game, as they say. It's not just like a political cause for me, but it's also my personal health. And of course, I've seen many people in my life, friends and family, affected by this. And I think there's a study actually, that shows only 12% of people in the US are metabolically healthy. So this is really something that affects everyone almost, and certainly affects me. And so that's, what's driven me. And then to actually see that there's solutions, and we can educate our way out of this. We can change our environment. We can change our behavior. And so there's so much good news. There's so many good solutions available to us now. That just, makes me more excited and keeps me going. I do also have a parallel art career, and I try to, find ways to recharge my batteries and stay creative and be able to keep my spirit and health going as well. So I think that's important for people that are involved full time in, social change work or public health work, because it is, does wear on you.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, very good for where we are right now. So bringing the sugar into it, you mentioned diabetes and prediabetes. So where does that sugar kind of fit into the equation? People are told it's bad, but why do we really need to crush our sugar cravings and not just have a little sugar once in a while?
Yeah, so I think one of my strengths is that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm an everyday guy, and yes, I eventually earned a couple of college degrees, but I really I mentioned that I wasn't until my 50s that I really started to learn what real nutrition science was, and that I'd been operating most of my life on paradigms or concepts about nutrition that simply weren't true. And I think that's still true for a lot of people. And I think understanding what sugar is the kind of the first step. And of course, sugar, glucose in its simplest form is fundamental to every living being on the planet. Every cell in our body processes it. In fact, if you don't have enough glucose, your body will even make its own glucose. And so, sugar is fundamental to life, but then there's different kinds of sugars. And so, of course, we have these processed sugars, which now have infiltrated 75% of our diet. I'm actually part of a startup which has created a filter that we can actually filter the entire food supply. And we have over 300,000 products in the database. And when we flip the no added sugar switch, literally 75% of the products that are on the shelf are eliminated from what you can shop from.
Wow.
And so it's really stunning when you can see that visually in front of you. When you're walking down the aisle, sugars are hidden in so many ways in foods with so many different names. And so that's another part of our work with Perfect, which is the name of the startup, is to identify the sugars out there and to identify where they come from and their physiological effects. And if anybody recognizes the name Dr. Robert Lustig, his focus has been on fructose. There's two main types of sugar, which I know but maybe not everybody in the listening does. But glucose, as I mentioned, is fundamental to life, and it's so important that we'll even manufacture it in our own bodies. But fructose, we find in fruit, is perhaps how visually people think of where fructose comes from. But of course, the main source of fructose in our diets is from highly processed forms of fructose like high fructose corn syrup. And that's been added to so many foods. And it turns out that fructose is actually processed or metabolized very differently in the body than glucose. Every cell in the body can process glucose, but fructose is primarily processed a little bit in the gut, but mostly in the liver. And that's an issue. And decades ago, the problem of fructose and how it was processed in the liver was mainly a problem of alcoholics. And we called it cirrhosis of the liver, which is basically a fancy name for a fatty liver or fatty liver disease. But now 4 decades later, fatty liver disease is the fastest growing chronic disease on earth. And it's now called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease because many people have it who don't drink alcohol, including children. And Dr. Lustig has famously said, sugar is the alcohol of the child. And what he's saying is that sugar is not alcohol, but alcohol is just a process that metabolizes certain products into a highly reformed, highly processed substance, which metabolizes essentially the same way as fructose in the liver. And this, once your liver becomes fatty, we have all kinds of health problems. It's like creates a cascade of issues. And so Dr. Lustig's work through his research at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco, has shown that fructose is metabolized differently, and in the quantities that we're getting it, it's actually a toxic substance. It's not a food. It's not helping us. It's actually robbing us of our health. And so to get to your point is, to understand sugar and why it may be harmful to us, we have to understand that there are different types of sugars, and then where we get those sugars and how we, from what foods and how they're processed can make a huge difference in our health and how they're metabolized. Of course, we can go into depth on that, but you tell me how far you want to go. It's like it's really a fascinating story, and we could spend the next hour just talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll let people look on your website and find a little more and check in.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of information at robertlustig.com, which he's got all of his research and information. If you want to really dig into fructose and sugar and processed foods, as well as Hypoglycemia Support Foundation, which is hypoglycemia.org. And we have particularly a wonderful infographic on reactive hypoglycemia, which is hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, is an early sign of your blood sugar metabolism being out of whack. And we call it the blood sugar roller coaster, because many people experience both high blood sugar and low blood sugar. And that's another point of confusion, is understanding blood sugar in the blood versus sugar in our food. When you have too much sugar in your blood, it's actually like acid, and it eats away your organs and destroys your health. Versus, when we have sugar in our food, it's this wonderful sweet substance that at the time seems like a real thrill. So again, understanding sugar science, both in our food and how it's metabolized in our body and in our blood, I think is really important. And bottom line is, my belief is everyone has to learn more science to really get their heads around this. It can't just be about advocates like me or experts like Dr. Lustig, scientists and so on, telling you. I think you actually have to learn some of this science. And that's what I eventually did, and was really, it's really a wonderful journey if you start to learn about it, because you start to understand what's really behind this, the processes going on with your health. So.
Yeah. It's great information. Hopefully people learn a little more, take initiative and learn a little more themselves. So what about someone that's kind of past the stages of, they know something is wrong, they've got the chronic disease, autoimmunity from the sugar. Do they, and I know I've talked with others that there's kind of a mental and emotional component in there too. Have you found it better people to start with changing the diet and the sugar, or work more on the mental and emotional part of it?
Well, the interesting thing is, there's a field now that's emerging called nutritional psychiatry. And it's really exciting, because what psychiatrists are learning is that many of the patients who come in with so-called mental health problems actually have a diet-related condition that can be corrected in many cases in a very short period of time. So Dr. Lustig did a study, it was called a fructose restriction study, where he was working with very metabolically sick children, and basically he didn't reduce their calories. It was called an isocaloric diet, which means simply he maintained their caloric level. So it wasn't about losing weight. It wasn't about reducing calories. An example he gives is he took away the donuts and he gave them bagels. So they still weren't getting a health food diet, but he was removing the fructose out of the diet. And he showed, and these results are on his website, are very dramatic, that in 9 days, many markers of children's health were dramatically improved, not just, little improvements, but dramatically improved. And these were children who were already sick. So I think what we're seeing is we can see pretty dramatic improvements in a relatively short period of time. Now, it's different for everybody. Some of us may be sicker than others. Our chronic disease state may be more advanced. But There's a company here in San Francisco called Verta Health, which is
Mhm.
applying the keto diet. Just one of the tools that are out there. And they're showing that people with really advanced states of type 2 diabetes are able to not only control it, but reverse it and eliminate the symptoms of the disease. I think that it used to be when I was first informed that I was pre-diabetic and then diabetic it was a dead end street. There was no going back. You're going to have
Yeah.
diabetes,
Yeah.
and it was just an inevitability. And there was never any counseling about, it was, if anything, about controlling it, managing it, but not reversing it and making it going away. So I think there's a real paradigm shift going on right now.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. People
So I
have
don't know,
hope.
did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. So also kind of on that, there's some that say that sugar can be an addiction. And some people may be addicted and some not. Does everybody need to like totally remove sugar from their diet? Even down to like, could they have like the honey and the maple syrup and things like that?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, anybody who says everybody should try this diet or take this approach, you should already be suspicious.
Yeah.
Another field of nutrition science that's evolved is called, personalized nutrition, which is
Mhm.
really a subset of personalized medicine. And one of the big paradigm shifts that's happening in medicine is simply the one size fits all approach simply is really not based in science. And previously, doctors, they may not have had the tools to apply a more individualized approach, but now they do. So yes, for some people, so-called healthier forms of sugars may be acceptable in their diets. Even scientists like Dr. Lustig, he's not anti-sugar.
Mhm.
Having a birthday cake or having a dessert once in a while may be okay in your diet, depending on how advanced your condition may be.
Yeah.
So there are tools to measure whether or not those forms of sugars are safe enough. So used to be you would have to take glucose, prick your finger and take a drop of blood and put it in a glucometer. And you could do that in the morning and you could look at your fasting blood sugar, but you would just get a snapshot. And some of these testing tools were not always so accurate. And if you just got a snapshot, you were just getting a point in time and it really didn't paint a big enough picture. And then there was sort of the gold standard, which was the glucose tolerance test, which was basically like drinking a big jar of Mountain Dew and then seeing what happens to your glucose in the next 3 to 5 hours. Most doctors and health institutions are too impatient to wait 5 hours, but that's actually preferred because
Mhm.
what's interesting is the hours after you consume sugar, what happens, both to your glucose as well as to your insulin response.
Mhm.
And so now we have these continuous glucose monitors, which used to be only available to type 1 diabetics. And there's insurance companies still aren't covering these devices for many people. But you can probably, if you are at risk, you can probably convince your doctor to let you to get a prescription. And you may have to pay for the device out of pocket, but the price has gone down significantly. And you don't have to use these CGM devices forever. You could use them for 2 weeks. And that's what a doctor I know, Dr. Ann Childers, based in Portland, she's a psychiatrist who bases her practice on metabolic and mental health. She uses that device and patients come in and they complain of various mental health problems. She gets them to use the CGM monitor. Week 1, basically baseline their current diet. Week 2, she puts them on a fairly lightweight carbohydrate restriction diet, nothing radical like the keto diet or
Yeah.
anything. And in most cases, she sees a dramatic change. The patients see a dramatic change.
Yeah.
And so we're now able to get a movie with the CGM monitors because every 5 minutes they're sending a signal to either your phone or to a reader device. and you start to get a move in. So you see, typically, as you know, you eat some carbohydrates and your blood sugar goes up. That's natural. Well, how far does it go up? How long does it stay there? And then when it starts to drop down, what happens? Does it drop back down to a normal level in the normal glucose range? Or does it go down to what's called a hypo or low blood? Do you have low blood sugar? It could drop below 70. It could stay there. You could feel shaky. You could feel hangry. And what they're finding is, to your point, is that some people at 90 maybe feel perfectly fine. That may be normal. That may be healthy for you. But for some people at 90, that's actually, they experience hypoglycemia or symptoms of hypoglycemia. So individuals respond in different ways to, with their blood sugar and to the foods they eat. And so there's a whole science emerging around this, how to look at that, and how people react to certain types of foods. And so I think it's really important to start to look at some of these tools and the science and technology that's becoming available to us, so we can start to figure out what type we are, where do we lie. And even they're applying this to the aging, to the gerontology community. And they're called agiotypes. In other words, how different people age differently. And one of the key types is called the metabolic ager. And so, this affects us our whole lifetime, not just from childhood, but all the way to our last moments on earth. So it's really important to start to look for those tools. And I could talk about some other ones. I mentioned PureFact, which is a consumer tool, a technology where you can just apply filters, and just, the easy thing is cut out the highly processed foods, the foods that you probably already know are bad for you. And do that, but do that with some criteria that's actually based on science, like the highly processed sugars. So there's plenty of ways to get sugar from natural foods, certain fruits and vegetables, without going for the processed carbohydrates, which convert to sugar so quickly in the body.
Yeah. Does a medical Western medicine know about these tools, or where might you go to have help with this to figure out what it's telling you?
Well, that's another great question. So, medicine, there's medicine and then there's medicine. So we have emerging fields like functional medicine, and doctors like Dr. Ann Childers and Dr. Lustig, who are really integrating cutting edge science into their practice. And then we have the old school where, they're just treating symptoms. Here's some medication and, put you on metformin, et cetera. So, so finding the right doctor is really not an easy process. There is an national organization called Low Carb USA, and they have a database of doctors around the country and around the world. So that's one place you can look. These are doctors that obviously are concerned about excess carbohydrates in the body, which is really a leading cause of most diet-related diseases. And so they have your odds of finding a doctor that's going to be sensitive to your issue, the kind of issues you may be dealing with, is there. I've tried the route of educating my own doctor, at UCSF and so on, but it's so hard because, and to be fair, I mean, they're doctors that are part of big healthcare systems. They're on like 15-minute increments, and they're just not given the time to really dig deeper, to reflect, to look at alternative treatments. And honestly, many of them are jaundiced or, biased that they can even change your behavior. And it's understandable. But there's also the fact that something like only 30% of doctors are even required to take one course in nutrition in medical school. So I think we have to learn not only to discriminate about different types of sugars and foods, but we have to learn how to shop for the right kind of doctor and to ask the right kinds of questions. And I realize it's hard to change doctors. I'm trying to do that myself right now in San Francisco and find a doctor that's more enlightened and tuned in to newer approaches. But their caseloads are really full because they're in big demand. So it's not an easy task, but they're, like I mentioned, Low Carb USA has one site database that you can use. But I think we also offer guidance on the hypoglycemia.org website to how, criteria for finding the right kind of doctor,
Yeah.
and also the kind of questions to ask. We also provide a quiz so that you can identify, part of the problem is just identifying some of the issues that are going on. So when you go to the doctor, I don't know about you, but once I step in the doctor's office, my mind kind of goes blank. So I
Yeah.
always take a list with me, and I have to pull it out. It's crumpled up piece of paper on my, from my pocket, and I say, "Are you ready for the list, doctor?" And so I describe, the symptoms. Then there's also something called the Diet Symptom Diary, which is a really great tool, and you can just use an old school version of a printed form, and we also provide that on the hypoglycemia.org website. And basically, you track what you eat, and then you also track your symptoms. So you might have heard of apps like MyFitnessPal, which track calories and also macronutrients, but they don't track symptoms.
Yeah.
And so basically what you want to correlate is, okay, I had a bowl of Captain Crunch for breakfast, and then I had a headache 2 hours later. Well, there probably was a correlation to what you ate. And so the Diet Symptom Diary is really valuable. And then taking the quiz, these tools are valuable to identify what's going on. And you before you even see a doctor, I think you already kind of get the picture that, oh, what I have to eat actually affects my health and well-being and my mental health. And if you connect those dots on your own, you may not even have to go see a doctor.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, a lot of great tools. So I know you've done a lot of really good work in the nonprofit area. Can you tell us a little bit about more about that? You've mentioned a little bit here, but is there another one that would be helpful for people?
Yeah, so I did found a national organization with Dr. Lustig called the Institute for Responsible Nutrition, and then merged that with another nonprofit called eatreal.org, and that is still going today. I moved on and decided I want to focus really deeply on advocacy and education. And so that led me to the Hypoglycemia Support Foundation, Roberta Ruggiero, who wrote a wonderful book called The Do's and Don'ts of Hypoglycemia. When I met her, I kind of, what I saw was a sort of the canary in the coal mine, if you will. Some doctors and researchers talk about going upstream of a problem, meaning let's not just look at the symptoms, let's try to find the cause. And one of the earliest signs and symptoms that something's amiss is your blood sugar being out of whack, the blood sugar roller coaster, blood sugar dysregulation, high blood sugar and low blood sugar. For high blood sugar, a lot of people don't notice the symptoms, but for low blood sugar, they're often very notable and dramatic. Most people know what it's like to be hangry. So I think almost all of us kind of know what it's like to kind of bomb or to feel like, oh God, I got to get some carbs. I got to get some sugar. I got to, and being on that, roller coaster is not fun. And so what I saw was an opportunity to go upstream and to look at this. And it's not just me who thinks this way. The scientist who actually discovered low blood sugar, Dr. Seal Harris, back in the 20s, he famously stated, the low blood sugar of today is the diabetes of tomorrow. So we've known now almost a century, that blood sugar and the symptoms, the dysregulation, the blood sugar being out of whack, is an opportunity to look ahead and make some changes before you get, full-blown diabetes, type 2 diabetes and so on. So I joined the Hypoglycemia Support Foundation as CEO several years ago, and this is a 40-year-old organization. So the founder has been, she's been doing this for 40 years on her own. It's a patient advocacy organization, which is another aspect of my work, which is really focused on the patient and sort of translating the science to the patient level, and really trying to translate what's going on in human terms. And being a patient and being someone who's affected by this personally, I feel like I have some ability to communicate in a language that everybody can understand. So the Hypoglycemia Support Foundation is a big focus of my work. And then I'm part of a startup, which is actually a for-profit, but many ways acts like a nonprofit. It's really a social enterprise, and it's still in stealth mode, as we say, but it's called Perfect, and it's this platform that enables people to filter the food supply according to any criteria developed by scientists or doctors like Dr. Lustig. And so we can filter any ingredient or ingredients that are in the food supply. And like I said, just filtering sugar out, that filters out 75% of the food supply. So we are at the Hypoglycemia Support Foundation sponsoring some preview groups, first opportunity to get in and try the technology and give us feedback before it goes live for the big audience. And we are working specifically with a number of nonprofits that may have criteria. For example, the ASPCA has a program for certified humane for people that are concerned about animal welfare. We developed 2 filters for the Hypoglycemia Support Foundation, 2 filters for Dr. Lustig, one for added sugar, but one for substances in the food supply that bring on early puberty. And then dozens of other filters. It could be allergies, it can be, you could have celiac disease, there's just endless lists of criteria that people are needing to apply, and oftentimes you need to apply it to different members of your family. And so the platform allows people to toggle on, to turn on a filter or turn off a filter, or mix and match filters depending on your personal needs, but also the needs of your loved ones. So that's another major aspect of my work. I've worked most of my career, over 4 decades in nonprofits related to health. But I also, this journey into the for-profit space is exciting because, actually getting a product out there that is beneficial to consumers, that we don't track their data, it's actually free to consumers, is pretty exciting. Because waiting around for government and, big food companies to tell us what's in the food, I think we'll be waiting forever for that to happen. And so the beauty of this kind of technology is that consumers can find this information out on their own without having to wait for the rest of society to catch up.
Yeah. Sounds like a great product. We'll have to check into it when you get it out there.
I'm really excited. Just one other thing, the nonprofit, the Hypoglycemia Support Foundation, is also going into the publishing business. We've started a press called Serotonin Press. One of our first authors is Dr. Thomas Flass, who's a children's doctor based in Montana, who happens to have a medical degree and a nutrition degree. So he's one of those rare breed doctors who really was formally trained in nutrition first, and then became a medical doctor for kids, pediatric, gastroenterology and so on. And what we found is just that there's doctors like Dr. Flass, they're not able to get their message out. They want to go further, just like Dr. Lustig did, who was also a children's doctor. They knew that they couldn't fix the problem just by treating patients one at a time, because more and more sick kids are coming to their door and they just can't treat enough. And so they write these books and they start to do advocacy and education because they know they have to reach a broader audience. And so we're excited that we're delving into this, because this kind of information has got to get out there, and the mainstream publishers don't seem to be paying enough attention to that. So that's one of our pet projects.
Yeah, that's great.
It's called Serotonin Press.
Okay. And that's another reason why I'm doing this summit, is just to get the information out there that a lot of people aren't able to get just in mainstream and on the internet. So great stuff.
Yeah, thank you for the work you're doing. I mean, it's just, even though there's perhaps more awareness about this problem than ever before, there's still so much specific education and misinformation that's going on out there. And of course, the marketing machine of processed food and big food is relentless. And so it's easy to kind of fall into that.
One other thing that a theory that you work with is that I found kind of interesting is relating the body's ecosystem to the environment we live in. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I was raised by a single working mom, and she was also, an advocate. She cared about the environment, and she had us out marching since I was a young child, and I participated in the first Earth Day. And what I've come to realize is that for people to care about the environment and to understand how ecosystems work, and I understand, the environment is complex business. Understanding global warming, et cetera, it's complicated business, and there's a lot of science to look at. And sometimes people just say, oh, "What the heck?" I'll leave the engine running, or et cetera, leave the water on. I think that once you bring it down to the level of the body's ecosystem, which is our metabolic system, the principles of ecosystem are exactly the same. We're just looking at scale of the organism versus a environmental system. But metabolism, this whole concept, the science of metabolism, is at the core of environmental science. And so I believe that by understanding our own health and understanding our own metabolic system, our own body's ecosystem, if we can really understand that, then I think we will finally begin to understand, well, this is how our environment works. This is how our world works. And we might be able to, like I talked about having skin in the game. If the environment is just this abstract concept over there that doesn't, it's hard to relate to us, then that's one thing. But if we see that the ecosystem of our bodies and how we metabolize things, and how certain substances in our food supply act like toxins, and we can apply that same thinking to our environment, then perhaps we will that's the holy grail, if you will, to unlocking what seems to be a total disconnect between humans and their environment. We only have this one rock, that's spinning through space at an incredible rate, and it's just 40 miles up is the end of our atmosphere. That's like me driving from San Francisco down to San Jose, and then it's over. And just to think that we just have this thin, layer protecting us from basically the coldness of space. It's so dramatic and compelling, but yet we still seem to be stuck in basically, polluting our bodies and, feeding our bodies the wrong kinds of foods and substances. And we're doing that to our environment. So it just seems like we could figure the two out in tandem. Perhaps that's the tipping point that we all need.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
It takes it beyond politics too, because I understand all the politics, both of the food and the environment, but really the science beneath this, it's not political. It's just the facts, man. It's just the way it is. And if we can understand that and realize it's not political, it's just science and understanding how it works, maybe it would take some of the all of the noise out of the conversation.
Yeah.
That's my hope, at least.
Yes, a lot of stuff for people to think about. So a couple more things, just what's one thing for people listening today that they could act on right now to get started if they want to reduce sugar or check into, we talked about the tools, but is there something they could just do today to make the first step?
I mentioned the two websites, robertlustig.com and hypoglycemia.org. Mm-hmm. Both of those sites are just loaded with resources. We also have Facebook pages for Dr. Lustig as well. And Dr. Lustig is a medical advisor to the Hypoglycemia Support Foundation. We have both public and private Facebook groups because, people have questions. They hear something, they want to know more and learn more. And they also want support because, I have to admit, there's plenty of people in my family that don't get it, who are already sick, but they're just not connecting the dots. And it's hard if you're trying to improve your health and get on the right kind of diet, and then you go to a family gathering and, there's Jell-O with marshmallows in it. And, I mean, those were comfort foods when I grew up. But, to me, that's now like death.
Yeah.
In other words, what I'm saying is we can socialize this problem that we have of improving our health by finding our dietary tribe or finding people who can support us online. So those are a couple of options there. And Dr. Lustig has given countless lectures. So if you really want to get into the science, there's many links to YouTube videos and so on his website. Famous one, of course, Sugar the Bitter Truth, which has been seen by over 10 million people. And then we have videos also on the hypoglycemia site, just about the blood sugar roller coaster and all kinds of tools. I mentioned a few of them. So you can start to get a handle on this. So I think the first thing is really to reach out. There's a lot of tools out there. Look into the continuous glucose monitor technology. It's really a game changer. It might cost you, let's just say it costs you a couple $100 to get started on that. But it's so much cheaper than going to the hospital every week, and all of the medical supplies and drugs and so on that would be waiting for you if you don't address the issue early on. And even if you already have type 2 diabetes and you're struggling with this, the glucose monitor gives you this instant feedback that can be really helpful. Of course, find the right healthcare provider and make sure that you're able to interpret the information you're getting and apply the right, actions. And then the technologies like what Perfect is offering. There's a sign-up page on the hypoglycemia.org website, hypoglycemia.org/perfect solution. But you can find it easily there. You can try out the technology and start to learn about it. I think just learning about filters, how to apply the right filters. What are you going to filter? What kinds of sugars are the most harmful? So those kind of things are out there. And we've also got a survey that we're taking on the hypoglycemia site with over 2,000 people. So to me, it kind of helps to know that I'm not alone in this. And there's sort of common symptoms and ways to identify this, even though each of us is individual. Like I said, kind of finding your dietary tribe, finding others like you who will share your issues, and finding an organization or a doctor that's actually giving, up-to-date science-based information. Anyway, those I think are some of the key solutions that I would point to.
Yeah. Some great first steps. And then you mentioned the blood sugar roller coaster, and you were nice enough to give everybody a copy of that free. If they just enter their email below, and then they can get a copy from you of that.
Great. Yeah, it's on our website, but we have a really high quality image of it. It could be, you could even print it out, take it to the printer and print it out, put it up on the wall. We spent a whole year in developing it. You might not think an infographic, well, I've seen infographic. This one's about 8 feet long if you actually printed it out. But it takes the information and breaks it down in really simple to understand terms, but also strong science basis. We have it vetted by many doctors. And I think if you just absorbed the information that's in that, you'd already be way ahead of the crowd. So.
Yeah. Hopefully everyone does that. Anything else you want to tell people today before we end the interview?
Well, one of my favorite subjects is, I'm writing a book about unconditional love. And I think beneath this, there's the science and there's the politics and there's all of the intellectual stuff around sugar and our health. But beneath this, I think, we also have to reconnect with our hearts, and we have to learn to love ourselves better. And I know this might sound touchy-feely, like here's this San Francisco guy talking about loving yourself. But this is really what it's about, This is a wonderful way to love yourself and love the members of your family by looking deeper into this and kind of going beyond some of the headlines and the slogans. And there's really no thou shalt nots here. There's no judgment. I've made all the mistakes you can make about diet. So I'm not coming at this, where I'm coming from is, I think when you explore this pathway in health, you're also exploring a way to love yourself and love the loved ones around you, I think, in a deeper way. And I think you'll be surprised what comes out of that. Besides the good health, you might also just feel better inside, knowing that your health and well-being is a top priority. So I hope that
Yeah, sure.
resonates.
Oh yeah, yeah, I love that. We all need to, yeah, be able to love ourselves a little better. I think that would make things a lot better in the world. So yeah, thank you so much for being here today. It was wonderful having you and great information.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you for the work you're doing. Get the word out there.
yeah, no problem. And thanks everyone else for being here, and we'll see you on the next video with some more great information.